Welcome to the Dr. DigiPol show. I am Alan Rosenblatt, aka Dr. Pol, and I am here for yet another installment of our show. Today we're going to be talking about news and politics in the social media age with Katerina Matza, who is a senior researcher from the Pew Research Center Project on Journalism and Media. I'm going to bring Katerina up. Katerina has been doing a lot of research on what types of how social media has been doing affecting politics in the news, looking at fake news, looking at how the media should be covering what politicians say on social media, and a lot of other really interesting information. Katerina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really exciting.
Yes, it's good to have you online. We are on shindig.com. We are also on Facebook Live, and we've been pushing it out through Twitter and Facebook as well. So, Katerina, let's start out. Just tell us a little bit about the media, the journalism and media project at the Pew Research Center.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a senior researcher at the Pew Research Center. I work in the journalism line of research. And what that means is that the Pew Research Center has many different projects, many different lines of research. One of those is basically news and media and information, and how basically Americans get informed and get their news. I've been with the Pew Research Center since 2010, and I've been working since then in the journalism project. And originally, I was mainly part of our State of the News Media team of researchers, where we study, and we still do, study, as the title says, the state of the news media in the U.S. And how different sectors, an overview of the sectors of how they did this past year. But in the last, I would say 2-3 years, I've switched my focus and expertise, studying mainly social media, but also more like using data and computational data, what we would say big data, in order to understand that new environment.
Great. And I must recommend to our audience that the State of the News Media report that you put up every year is fantastic. It really is a great deep dive into all the different aspects of what is happening in journalism, who's watching it, what kind of things are they doing. I mean, really, really very interesting. I've always enjoyed reading it. So.
Thank you. That's very encouraging for us to hear, because
yes.
It's a lot of work, and it's good to hear that, because it gives us an incentive to do it.
Yes, of course. And so I highly recommend people go to the was it pewresearch.org?
Yes. And under that, you'll see a media, and that's the other research that we do, because as I said, we have research on politics and political behavior, and social demographics, our global work also on other global issues and the views of other nations of Americans. So yeah.
Yes, great research across the board. Absolutely. So let's start out at sort of at the 30,000 foot level. Social media has come along. It's disrupted in many ways the profit models of the news media. It's affected the news cycle. It's forced. It seems to be forcing the news media into a race to get stories first, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. What's your impression? Just how much has news changed as a result of social media?
News has changed a lot. And it's not only social media. I've been tracking U.S. journalism since 2010, but even our research has been, going all the way through the early 2000s. And, social media is an element of that change, but there has been a lot of technological change in general. The business model of U.S. journalism has changed because of the technology and because of online journalism. But certainly after 2012, especially when President Obama jumped into, and from 2008, of course, but both presidencies, during the campaign season, how he was using social media to reach directly to to the citizens and to the members of the public did shift a lot this conversation. But it's not only that; it wasn't only part of the campaigns and politics. We In 2012 we first did a big study on social media, especially looking at Facebook, which is still the biggest social media platform in terms of like where people are members and where they get exposed on news. And what we did find there, it was that a big portion of the American public get news on that platform. And we repeated that study actually last year. But taking a step back and thinking about like even what all these numbers, all this research is telling us is that there is this new space with way more players. It's not controlled content anymore. There's a lot of choice, and there is a proliferation of news content, which then it's also difficult on the side of the citizens and the users, especially, to parse through and understand. So all this, it's this new reality that also has an effect on the business side of journalism.
Right. So, I mean, early on there was all this excitement about citizen journalism, and all of a sudden, we could have a reporter on every street corner with a phone able to report on what's happening in real time, live reports, and all this kind of stuff. And there was this great hope that there would be an enriching of the news, but we've seen a lot of sort of trolling, a lot of fake news, a lot of bullying. Um, are we seeing the citizen journalism that we were hoping to see, and it's just getting we're just getting distracted from it because of this other stuff, or has this other stuff truly suppressed citizen journalism on the good side?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's, I cannot really speak to, is citizen journalism a good thing or a bad thing? But what I can say is that there's definitely more choice. That's not necessarily good or bad. There is a challenge there for, members of the public and news organizations to the content they produce, the news organizations themselves, and the content that they receive and how they go for it, on the side of the citizens, of the users. But still, what I want to bring back to the data, though, what we saw was not so much the active production in a way of news content from citizens. We saw a lot of conversations, a lot of, in a way, one level of engagement with news, but it wasn't so much production. I mean, if I remember correctly, to be honest, that was like almost about 2 years ago. We did a study where we asked whether you shared, for example, an original piece of content into like a news event that you experienced, if you uploaded a picture. It wasn't such a high share of the American public that they do this kind of activities. But, they are online and they follow news organizations and they share news content from, news organizations that they have produced. The interesting thing that we saw in 2012 and in 2015 is that it continues, especially on Facebook, this experience needs to be a social experience and an experience that is accidental. Most of the users that they are on those platforms, they are not there seeking news. They are there because they're doing other things, that they are part of their social life, looking at pictures and all this. And as they are scrolling and going through the site, they bump into news. And they see a piece of content that they want to dive in or share or actually click on and read. So that's, I think, one of the elements that sometimes, we forget when it comes to social media.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because, I think some of your research has said something on the order of 63% of American adults get their news from social media, 45% get it from Facebook directly. And yet, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not by
Yeah,
intention,
67%.
it's just
Yeah, sorry,
by
I didn't mean to
accident.
interrupt you, but
No,
you're
no,
right.
it's all right. But it's not by design. They're there doing their stuff, and news rolls past them for many of those people.
Yeah, and another element in order to think of that, and we've seen it in our research, is that not all social media are the same.
Right.
We've seen different kinds of activities, especially news-related activities, that they are performed differently on one platform, for example, Instagram, and differently on Facebook or on Twitter. For example, we saw that Twitter it's predominantly a breaking news platform, while Facebook has this more accidental experience, while Instagram, for example, had more of a specific issue, hashtag, for example, following. So, sometimes for even us researchers, I would say, we use the term social media in order to understand the environment and these changes, but at the same time, it's good to remind ourselves that we are talking about very different dynamics and very also different audiences that they're using these platforms.
Yeah, very, very interesting. It seems to me that one of the big challenges for journalists these days is that they're not only expected to research and write their stories, but they're expected to use social media to promote their stories as well. To what degree do you find that, um, in general, that the press, journalists across the board are able to use social media generally to promote their work, and to what extent do you think that they're able to tap into these differences in the way people use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with respect to consuming the news and distributing the news? Are journalists
I
hip to
think that's a
this?
very I think that's a very fair question, and I've had a lot of conversations with journalists. I mean, especially I usually attend the Online News Association conference every September, and this is one of the things that we've been discussing the past 2 years. And actually, that was exactly what I was discussing on one of my talks this past March in South by Southwest, which was like, so do we need to cater, to different social media and have a different content and everything? Well, I cannot suggest or recommend what each news organization should do because, of course, each news organization is different and specific. But from what our data is showing, is that these are different audiences and demographics. And from the questions that we've asked and the answers that we've gotten, is that they are using these platforms differently and for different reasons. And they might be using them all. It's not necessarily that you have one person using just Facebook. They might be using it all, but for different reasons.
Interesting, interesting. So is it your impression, having talked to journalists and looking at the data, that reporters need to be better trained on social media? Or, I mean, are they largely self-taught, or is there any guidance being provided to them?
I mean, I don't know. I think journalists are there. We are all having these conversations. They are reaching, for example, to us as far as I can speak, in order to understand that space. Um, but in the content, as far as we've seen, it is widespread in most platforms. I mean, the one element that we've noticed is that there is a disconnect, and that's not about social media, but online in general, of revenue. And for example, I'll bring newspapers as one of the examples that they're not doing that well, but are still they're struggling very much in print. However, the revenue stream has not transferred online, and that's something that they're not compensating for the losses that they're seeing in print online. And one of the things that we saw actually recently in June, we had this new report on called Modern News Consumer. One of the things we asked was preference and how, not only what kind of platforms and sources are you using in order to get information, but also your preferences. And in terms of reading and watching. And reading, a lot of, especially the young people, like reading and prefer reading, and they have migrated from the print, you know, the print platform in a way to online, and they read online. So that's, I think, a nice element to think about.
It seems to me that before you could read the news online, you had to buy a newspaper if you wanted to read the news, or you had to pick one up off of a park bench. And you know, it's kind of saving the park from litter, but also informing yourself at the same time. Uh, so it seemed to me that in that model, most of the people who read the news were paying for the news. Are we seeing a smaller number of people paying for the news now that they're moving online, or is it, or is it the numbers are still the same and just the news industry has gotten so big that it's just a smaller percentage of the overall news industry?
Across the sectors, we've seen increases in online revenue, but these increases are not that high, or in a way, they're not that fast in order to pick up the losses from print. The magnitude and the share is very uneven. So, for example, you have, if we take newspapers again, the share of online revenues out of the total revenues for the industry is extremely small. It's growing a lot, and in big numbers, but it's not to that level to compensate for those losses. So, in that sense, yes, there is growth, but the industry has certain mechanisms and certain standards in a way that they are used to, collecting more money that they're not seeing online, or they're not themselves migrating online. Another issue when it comes to online is, the control of the pie of online revenue. And that's one of the things that we've seen, year and over year, and at least for the past 5 years that I've been working on Scaling News Video 6, that you have 5 technological companies that control almost half of the online pie, and that leaves much less space for news organizations to be able to absorb online revenue.
Let's flip it and just kind of look at readership and exposure to news. Are you seeing that a large percentage of people in the country are consuming news as a result of the internet?
Yeah, interesting news and following hasn't dropped. I mean, there is a generational, difference, and I wouldn't say divide, but there are some differences. But those are not different from what it was, the Gen Xers generation when they used to be young, or baby boomers when they used to be young. That's more of like an age interest that changes. Younger people sometimes, especially on the early 20s, not being that involved with news. But we actually put out a civic engagement and news project. It was about maybe a month and a half ago, that showed the strong ties between civic engagement and local news consumption. And I've been working on local TV for the past 6 years. It's been one of my beats and interests and expertise. And you haven't seen, a migration from local TV. Actually, it's been, the numbers have been steady and with small increases sometimes depending on the year. Definitely, they have an older audience, but the interest is there and consumption is there.
That's good. It's good to have an informed electorate. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk. It seems to me that one of the challenges that the news media has had when it comes to social media on the content side is how to cover what politicians, elected officials, prominent opinion leaders, what they're saying on social media. How important is it? How how should that be covered? I mean, obviously, if we just let any tweet from President-elect Trump capture the news cycle, that's that's one way of doing it, but it isn't necessarily the you know researched approach to news and journalism that we've come to be reliant upon. So, what should be done? How should they deal with that stuff?
We've been studying politics and media anyway since 2000, from the 2000 election, and I we we've always done reports and research in every election cycle. So it was, at least to me as a researcher, very useful to go back to these reports this year, especially as we were preparing to do our 2016 report on media and the campaigns, to kind of see, like the bigger picture. And to me, it was evident that from what we've studied from since 2000 has been more of an evolution of the media environment. So, we started in a political environment where the message was very controlled from the politicians, that but it was mediated by news organizations. And that was the main avenue candidates could put their messages out. There were there were websites, but they were very limited, or they were very clunky back then. It was interesting to see those screenshots from back then. And eventually, we are getting to 2008 and 2012 and 2016, where this kind of relationship shifted and evolved in a way where, on the one hand, political candidates have way more control because they can reach the public with no media coverage. And that started with President Obama, and we saw that in our research. And to me, that shows kind of like how the media has transformed the media environment, not necessarily news organizations, but how that ecosystem has changed. So in 2016, when we studied, we saw the social media output and the websites of candidate Hillary Clinton and candidate Donald Trump. And it was interesting how they were using these different avenues and different platforms very differently. Mm-hmm. And we know that Donald Trump, for example, was tweeting a lot and communicating a lot directly with the public, while Hillary Clinton was not doing that a lot. She was focusing a lot on her message on the website, having a lot more information, for example, on her website available. So I'm not sure how this is going to evolve, to be honest, but I do think, to me, it's more of an evolution of the technology and the choices and the platforms and the tools that not only politicians but also news organizations have in hand to reach the public.
I've been looking at this along the same time that you guys have been looking at this, a little less systematically and more in the trenches. And one thing that seems to strike me as part of this evolution, and I want to get your take on the feasibility or the viability of this perspective, is that if we look at the way Obama used social media during his elections, it was, as you said, it was about talking directly to the public and persuading the public, bypassing the media. And one thing that I think I see more under Trump, more, and maybe it did exist before, but much more under Trump, is that he's not just talking to the public; he's also using social media to manipulate the press, changing the narrative, changing the story.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do a deep content analysis of all the content of his campaign. But yeah, he did, for example, on his website, he did have the press that was covering him, like the clips. For example, something that Hillary Clinton did, and he was retweeting a lot of media coverage of himself. But he was also retweeting a lot of members of the public, something that we didn't see on the other side of the aisle. So
Yes, he's definitely reaching in and sharing stuff from all different sources and not always vetting what he's sharing. Sometimes he's sharing from very questionable sources.
yeah, but that's I think also, and that's but also forces in order somehow to study, the that space of fake news. For now, we did this small report a month ago, but this is a general phenomenon of that environment, of this online environment, and yes, was accelerated by this campaign. Um, but
Yeah.
it is more widespread than one person.
It's fascinating. I'm glad you brought. It's good for us to transition to fake news because I know you've been doing some work on that. Um, Trump has been attacking the press, calling CNN fake news, at his press conference yesterday, uh, and I have an application installed, an extension in my Chrome browser called BS Detector. And what it does is when you go to a news website, it puts a banner as to whether or not that website has been flagged as a clickbait site, as a fake news site, as a satire site, as a way to alert people. And now recently they've integrated so that individual tweets that link to these so-called fake news websites get that little banner. And it kind of surprised me yesterday because Donald Trump tweeted a link to an article that he presented as proof that BuzzFeed was fake news. And in the tweet itself, my browser application put a banner saying that the link that he provided was to a fake. So he was using a fake news website to accuse a mainstream website of being fake.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, so that's an interesting observation. I'm not expecting you to dig deep into that. I know that you guys are a nonpartisan outfit and you want to stay clear of that kind of stuff. But why don't we talk a little bit about how the public is processing fake news? What are they dealing with? How are they seeing it? How are they able to differentiate?
They're very confused. That was the biggest takeaway of this survey. Um, yeah, 64% of Americans think that you know fake news and fabricated news causes confusion. And it speaks back to what I was saying about this proliferation of choices and content that, in addition to more partisan content, uh, that people are having a lot of difficulty parsing through, and they're telling us about that. They clearly said that yes, this fake news, or the fake news, that the conversation that we're seeing, it's very confusing. Um, but the one interesting element of what we saw, like, in addition to this, was that 23% of the public actually has shared a piece of fabricated news, or what we would say is fake news.
What percent?
I mean, they would either know that in advance, and they would know that they're sharing a piece of fake news, or they would have found out afterwards. So after the fact, after the sharing. So that's the idea of responsibility and who is the gatekeeper of that space. And we did ask that, and what do Americans think about who should has responsibility about this? And they were attributions to politicians, citizens, and the social media companies themselves and the search engines themselves was quite even. Um, it was about 40% dedicated to these three groups. So I think these are interesting numbers as a first dive into what is happening and how the public is processing this.
Yeah, this is a, I mean, I'll talk about fake news from the perspective of, you know, was it done strictly to drive business, traffic to a site for money? That was a big part of, say, the Macedonian fake news websites. But there were clearly some websites that were set up to do fake news, to do political disinformation, to affect the election, and differentiating between the two. Were you able to differentiate between those two in understanding how people respond to fake news?
I mean, one of the things that we did at the time, because it was a very short, uh, after the election, we gathered and we said, okay, we need to get some numbers on this to understand what's the first understanding of what is happening. But we definitely discussed about looking at content, even kind of like asking people about specific stories, but we haven't had the chance to do that. So I'm not promising, but it's definitely something that I personally think is interesting and
Right,
might.
right. So, where is your research agenda going? What do you think are the most important things we should be looking at with social media, fake news, politics, news consumption?
Yeah, future is so, I would say, it's very difficult to predict. And as a researcher, especially with the center in the past 6 years, I've many times during the year would have to turn our gear and our attention to something else from what we've planned because news happens and developments and things happen and you just need to study and forget your original plan. But there are some trends that I think we've identified that in the past, even a couple of years, that we won't continue studying or we know that there might have an impact on how people are getting news. One of them is polarization. And that's what we've been studying since the mid-90s. And our colleagues at the political research project, they've shown that there's increasing polarization in the American public. And when we studied polarization through the lenses of media in 2014, we saw stripe differences between the two, strong ideological groups and their media diets. And my professional opinion and experience, that this is going to continue to be a big driver. That partisanship and increased polarization in the US. And the second element that I would say, it speaks a bit to this idea of fake news and truth and facts and how people perceive the information and how they parse through the information that they're looking at, but also the role of technological companies in this environment and how this, I think it's going to be even more increased in the following years.
So, there's this issue of polarization, and there's elements, I've seen some of your work that say, liberals tend to read these sources, conservatives tend to read these sources. Are you able to figure out, given that and some of the work that's been done with regard to the way Google and Facebook segregate what they share, searches or in news feeds based on your own historical pattern? How much is that segregation because people are choosing to only go to one set of news sources versus another, versus they're only being exposed to one set versus the other?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. You're taking me back to my dissertation because I'm also pursuing a PhD at this time, writing my dissertation. And that's specifically like the theory and the idea of selective exposure that you're bringing up. But one of the interesting things that saw in this 2014 report on political polarization and media habits. And I love to show this usually on a slide, is the makeup, for example, of Fox News. Who is watching Fox News? And one of the things, I first asked people, where do you think, what is the distribution of viewers you think of Fox News? And everyone says, of course, it's to the right. I'll see a mountain where the distribution is shifting to the right. And then I pull up the slide, and that's not the case. Actually, the distribution of Fox is quite normal. It's like a lot in the center. And you will have, of course, niche, smaller outlets that they are, of course, on both the ends of the ideological spectrum. But a lot of the, maybe I would call it mainstream or bigger outlets, even though they have an ideological leaning, if we think that the audience is not necessarily of one or the other ideology. So I think that's interesting. Yes, of course, Fox News in our study, for example, was as named as a main source for a big share of the consistent conservatives. But if you take a look at all the people that we asked, actually there's a lot of consistent liberals or moderate liberals that they were they're choosing to get news from Fox News, for example.
Interesting. Is part of your research to help identify which news sources are fake news and which are not? Do you have that sort of classification?
No,
So
we
you're just
haven't.
you're basing on when you ask people, fake news confuses them. You're asking them to assess on their own whether they've seen fake news.
Yes, yes. And I think that was one of the notes we had in that report that, for this specific report, which was actually one of our small ones, we didn't have the opportunity to, get to that next level.
One of the things about fake news that seemed to be popping is that initially the conversation was about a lot of right-wing websites putting out fake news, and there's a very deliberate effort to kind of change it and use fake news to describe mainstream news and left liberal news sources. Do you have any sense of what the ideological divide is between?
There's not a lot of divide. That was one of the interesting things that we saw, that we were, we had our hypotheses when we were going into this study, but what we saw is that there were no demographic differences. This issue cuts across ideology.
In terms of the audience?
Of our respondents. When we asked them these questions, this series of questions about fake news, there were no difference in how they were responding in terms of responsibility, of confusion, of sharing in terms of of based on ideology.
Interesting. I guess the complementary research would be to focus on the sources themselves and some analysis of what they are, who they are, what they're saying, and then tie those two things together. I hear you started this a couple months ago, and there's a lot more work to be done in this space.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. Well, are there any other big findings about the social media news and politics that you want to report that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I think just to reiterate, we saw increases in misconsumption on social media when we did our follow-up study almost a year ago. And another element that I know we didn't talk about a lot, because we're thinking of online as one space, is again that the rise of mobile. And not only we saw increases of news consumption on on mobile devices, and desktop was about the same, but we did ask a follow-up question this time around that was asking about preferences. And there is more people prefer mobile devices than desktop. So there is a shift also there to think about in terms of online content.
Is there some sense that if people are consuming news via mobile, that they're doing it quickly and giving it less thought?
No, we haven't seen anything to this effect.
Gotcha.
The one thing that we saw, and I think it's one of our first computational projects that we did last year, was about long form journalism, because we care to see how long form pieces of content were consumed on mobile devices and how much time people spend, and they were spending not only on absolute terms more time with long form content, and that was engaged time, so meaning like that they were keep reading or touching the screen to go through that content. So I think that was also an interesting element to think about, mobile devices, because sometimes we think that it's a very long article, for example, people might go away or turn it off, but we saw signs of activity.
Right. Well, this has been really, really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the research that you're going to be coming out with, because you've started to focus on some very hot topics that I think are going to be really important, on top of all the fantastic work that you guys have been doing. And I hope at some point we start seeing some analysis that merges together some of the data that you're collecting with some of the data that's being collected at your colleagues' shop in the Pew Internet project. Because I think that there's some interesting cross data that could be very useful. So thank you
Yeah,
very
we're
much.
definitely trying. All of us are trying to talk here to each other. And, yes.
Well, I appreciate your time, and give my best to your colleagues, and everybody will all be looking forward to your work. Before you go, just tell everybody what your web address is.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. I lost you
What
there.
what is your web address? Your URL.
Oh, sure. It's www.pewresearch.org.
All right.
And also for media and news, you can also find us on www.journalism.org.
That's a good URL. Journalism.org
I
and
know, it's very easy.
pewresearch.org. I highly recommend it. An amazing collection of data and analysis that goes back many years. And thank you for all your hard work and insights, Katerina. And we'll talk to you another time.
Thank
I'm
you for
gonna
inviting me.
my pleasure. I'm gonna bring Mr. Barnett, Ben Barnett, up right now, and we're gonna talk a little bit about what's going on in. If I can find my cursor. There it is. Uh, So, a lot's been happening on the other side of politics. Hello, Ben. How are you today? Uh, hello?
I'm here. I'm here. You hear me?
There you are. Yeah, I can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are things going? You're looking very TED Talky.
Yeah, things are going great. Actually, came up from the city, Philadelphia here, and yeah, a lot going on. It's 65 degrees out today, so it was an interesting conversation about Lyme disease and ticks on the way home.
Interesting. And
Fascinating.
it's snow on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. So we figured if all the ticks come out, they'll die on Saturday. So it could be a good thing.
Well,
But yeah, lot going on. Lot going on. Good to see you, Al.
good to see you too. So tell me, um, things are really going kind of crazy when it comes to President-elect Trump, social media. Um, During Obama's farewell address 2 nights ago, was it 2 nights ago already? Yeah, 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
While he's giving this, stay strong kind of speech, things were really kind of breaking down for Donald Trump on Twitter. Apparently, um, documents had been released that allege, and some of it is confirmed, but very little of it has been verified yet, of ties to Russia between his campaign and his business organizations, and this very disturbing information about, I guess, well, I mean, the hashtag that's floating around on Twitter right now is Golden Showergate. What do you make of it all?
Well, what I make of it is that we're having a conversation about Golden Showergate and POTUS, two hashtags, in the same sentence here is what I'm thinking, and not so much that it might have happened or not have happened. The fact that we're even having this conversation in any level to me is distracting, not relevant, uh, useless banter, and really bringing up sort of what's been, frustrating a lot of people and what the media has been sort of perpetuating, what's become important in terms of drive ratings, perhaps. So I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in this type of thing. This type of behavior, I think we knew. This is just reinforces what we already know, right? So is this unexpected for people? Is this that much of a shock? Or is it sort of the personal nature with the Obamas that seems to, be giving this situation a bit of traction out there? And so that's sort of my first interaction. The next one is the fact that these are unconfirmed, unverified reports, and other outlets, refuse to release them for that reason. So,
Right.
but then it brings, the other point up, and I'll leave you on this last point is that during the election, why was nothing released about the Republicans and Trump? So, here we are seeing this sort of, information dribble out there. Now I think it's like 33 pages. It's an avalanche of information that I can believe, in my opinion, is frankly only the tip of the iceberg about this person.
It's interesting. At the same time that we're thinking about, that this is, a blackmail potential that holds Trump, it strikes me that we could go both ways on this, because it struck me that there is this possibility that it isn't verified, it isn't real, it's disinformation that's been put out by Putin in Russia in order to get the conversation going without it actually being true, in a way to get all of us to attack Donald Trump and destroy his credibility and weaken him as he goes into inauguration. And so if
Yeah,
Putin's goal is to simply weaken Donald Trump, get him elected and then weaken him so that we are at a weaker position vis-a-vis Russia, then in a way we're all complicit in making that happen. On the other
yeah,
hand, it could be that he actually did do this, and that while it's unverified at this point, there may be some truth to some of it anyway. Then there's the other aspect of this. We've got him accusing CNN of being fake news, but if you read the news, CNN reported that Trump was briefed on this information and did not share the dossier, did not go into detail about what the information was. So CNN actually reported accurate information. BuzzFeed, on the other hand, released this information, and while unverified, rationalization there, well, if we didn't release it, it was probably going to get released anyway. And what we did is released it with context and identified what was unverified and what was not unverified in it. And so the argument could be made that BuzzFeed too released something that was going to come out anyway and gave context to it that would not have come out otherwise. That if you really read BuzzFeed and you really read CNN, they were saying this information is floating around. He was briefed on it. It is unverified, but it is out there. And we know, given Trump's own campaign activities, where he consistently and repeatedly pushed out information that was not verified about Obama in his birth certificate, about Ted Cruz's father and his association with Lee Harvey Oswald, about Hillary Clinton and John Podesta with regarding the pedophilia ring at a pizza shop, and a bunch of other things about her health. I mean, this is a man who has been saying, I'm not saying this, but people are saying this online. And he's been using that line for the last 8 years. And all of a sudden, when it's used against him, it's a travesty. It's
Yeah.
karma.
Well, I mean, look, we sit here, with critical insight, as a discussion background, so we think about this, but, and I think what we do well on the show is sort of show the sort of layperson's perspective on something like this. So, look, I mean, if you think about it, I can't see any pattern except this pattern in Trump's behavior, his campaign, where this type of information is constantly denied or lied about, or thrown back at the press as fake news. So, again, this is something that I feel is normal behavior. Trump and his team has shown this type of reaction to information, for example, like this in the past, and I think they're going to do it in the future. But let me step back for a second here, because this fake news piece, it keeps coming up here. And, I'm looking at the fake news comment by Trump, and I was shocked by that. I mean, I was completely surprised that that would be the interaction to somebody. In other words, saying, I don't want to talk to you. You are producing lies and propaganda, and really accusing it, which is clearly an outlet of reputable state here that, is slander. It's libel. I mean, I'd be curious to know how, Trump would react if that situation reversed. But my point is with BuzzFeed here and fake news is that I don't see anything here as necessarily fake news. I see your point on how this is out there. We're going to put some context around this. We're going to give this, some due diligence. And we're actually going to do that research that everybody's suggesting isn't there. So, should have been put out. If I were BuzzFeed, I would have put it out. I would have put it out after the press conference, which I think would have been an interesting way to do it, instead of giving Trump the ability to sort of mock this type of information at the conference. If I was a journalistic outlet like that, that's what I would have done, so as to not interfere like that, not knowing this type of candidate, this type of person, how they would have used that time, that platform, to discredit anything that came out, especially under such subjective terms. So I'm not surprised by any of this. I feel Trump is continuing, and his team now are continuing to toot the same horn. And I feel really the big issue that's happening here is the lack of accountability from the news standpoint. I'm really having a hard time watching this document out there right now, and the discussion around it in the mainstream news is shocking to me. It's shocking.
So one of the things that I've seen in some of this analysis is, Trump is going after CNN, accusing them of fake news on Twitter and in a press conference. Ironically, he says, you guys are fake news, and then he turns around and takes a question from Breitbart, which has a long history of publishing false information. And
that's what I'm saying. It's this is normal. You're right. But
yes.
Why is this moment not the issue here? Why are we continuing to discuss what is fake news or something like that? Why are we not discussing the President of the United States elect making these suggestions, making these things a reality? Why is this not the discussion?
Well, it's interesting because the accusations that he made against CNN, Shepard Smith over on Fox News comes out and completely blasts the president as being out of line, as it's wrong for him to bully and to call out CNN for this. It's incorrect what he's saying, and then you have this conversation that the classic fascist dictator approach, or the totalitarian dictator approach to the media, is to discredit the media. First you take out one, and if you get away with that one, then you can start using that criteria, as weak as it is, to take out the next media outlet and the next media outlet and the next media outlet.
Right. And you know what, Al? This is a National Socialist approach. Okay, it is an approach towards nationalism that discredits anything that doesn't push a form of nationalism forward. And that nationalism might have different meanings for different people. That's why I think we see this alt-right community really gravitate towards Trump. Yet, from my look into this, I don't see Trump as a Nazi or a neo-Nazi or anything on this level. But we see where the dog whistle, we see where the process that enables this group. So, I'm very, 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 very surprised after this press conference that analogy, and I mentioned the War Berlin Diaries, a diary of a foreign war correspondent in 33 to 1939, like very famous book, talks all about fake news, how fake news was to justify propaganda, how propaganda justified fake news, and this juxtaposition between the two to push forward agendas that nobody else except for that clique, that Nazi clique, really had any intentions to give anybody any interaction for. So in a way for them to push that agenda forward was to push these two principles, these two pillars of quote unquote, use a term, fake news. This is the exact term used in the 1930s in Nazi Germany, okay? And propaganda, and having those two intersect and cross over and entwine, which then becomes the national dialogue. And that to me is inadvertently happening here. It's happening here. The bottom line is it's what's appearing in front of us. And
the
this
reality is
really one of the big questions.
Yeah, and to kind of drive your point home, while all this conversation is taking place over there on these topics, which are upsetting and disturbing for sure, all of his cabinet nominees are going through hearings, and we're not hearing much. I mean, that news is being drowned out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important. This actually, maybe an organization like yours here on Shindig is a good way to sort of intersect these type of clips and this information. So, for example, today we were all watching Rubio's, time today, at the Senate hearings for Tillerson. And I mean, I highly recommend anybody. It was probably the best back and forth I saw out there from a candidate, Rubio, that I was very disappointed in during the election season, but clearly had polished up these discussions about Russia. Clearly. And Tillerson's response was essentially to walk away from every single question, from genocide in Aleppo via, the Russian military, brought up Chechnya, brought up a lot of very, very, very cohesive facts that suggested clearly Putin and the Russians were committing war crimes, and in no instance, was anybody, it was Tillerson saying that this, I can't say that, I don't have the facts, I don't have the information.
Let's give full context. Tillerson did say the annexation, what Russia's doing in Crimea, Ukraine, Aleppo is inappropriate, is against international norms and laws, but he's reluctant to focus specifically on war crimes as the accusation.
Correct.
So he does recognize that there's a problem, but going to the level of war crimes, that's I almost think that, well, he says these are all really bad transgressions by them, but if you call him a war criminal before you become Secretary of State, you could never have negotiations with him.
It's a great point, and it's the point that we were making when we were talking. Like, so you have really two things, but here's how I would have suggested. The reason why it became an issue is because probably, and this is us being hypothetical on a talk show here, but really, hypothetically, these are war crimes. We're talking about the extensive use of chemical warfare. We're talking about carpet bombing cities and civilians indiscriminately. We're talking about all this sort of destruction of areas indiscriminately. Not even dropping a leaflet from an airplane saying "get out of town." It's more, if we want to know what shock and awe is, this is shock and awe. This is truly shock and stun, maybe awe then stun. So the issue to me in watching this testimony wasn't to get him to say yes, these are war crimes, because I think from a diplomacy standpoint, you're 100% correct. But I certainly would like to believe, if I were part of this committee, I would like to have seen him be way more interested in bringing up the fact that there are major crimes going on over here and that there really needs to be a settlement. And then it would have been nice to hear, at some level, maybe a top level, bullet point some ideas on what he plans to do about this. I
Yeah.
mean, and that, what their thoughts are. So, and that to me is what I wanted to hear. I didn't want to hear him just finger point and thumb your nose, and I think you're correct. So, but what I didn't hear was, any type of indication, that this is going to
I hear you. I hear. The other thing that I saw popping out of the coverage of the hearings is that at least three of his cabinet nominees have come up and said they think Russia tried to interfere in the election and they were behind the hack and they deserve the sanctions. And even Trump in his press conference yesterday said Obama was appropriate in his response to Russia. That's not quite what we're seeing in other contexts. That's not what they're saying in other situations.
Well, I agree. And what I think we are seeing also with Trump is his ability. I'm going to give this guy a bit of credit here, is that once he's sitting down, look, his thing is I make deals. The bottom line is if you have four of the top national security advisors walking into your office, top four major intelligence agencies across the planet, telling you things, and your response is to say, you're wrong, with zero facts on why, zero insight on why, et cetera, you're not a deal maker. That's not a deal maker. That's called ignorance. I believe
these guys, he's not making deals with intelligence. They're his research arm. They're his staff.
They're saying, here it is. This is it. Here's your data. Here's what you asked us to do. What are you going to do with it? Well, I'm going to ignore it. I think that would put him into all types of jeopardy within, his own party, like everything. Like it just down the line, I just can't see that being possible. I think he could take it to the end. I don't want to call it brinksmanship to see who's going to crack, but at the end of the day, he's obviously taking these things to the extremes. He gets the data and information, and then he seems to come out and moderate. It seems to be is working with him.
He does damage before, in the process. It does a lot of damage.
A lot of damage, and it sets people off on paths while he's in the background here. Hopefully this is not his version of leading behind, if I may. Leading from behind. Like I'm a little scared of that. It's like you'll throw out the bone or you'll blow the dog whistle and then you'll step back. So my thing is like, well, what's the goal here? What are you achieving in this case? In the case of the election, he achieved votes. We're not talking votes here. Now we're talking real life stakes. So I think the intelligence piece is a positive sign in this moment to getting the ideology and the social question, all these things. This was a very crucial moment. I'm not happy with the press conference.
Is that Romeo or Bob or Luna giving comments there?
That's Romeo Void.
Well, Ben, it's certainly been a very exciting week, and in the world of social media and politics, I'm sure it's only going to become more of a roller coaster as we move forward. I know that there are people that are trying to convince Trump to stop using Twitter, but he is.
No.
I don't see that happening at all. Although I do see the value.
I think it's a mistake if they do.
Yeah, I do see that he's sort of
people should
slowed down a little. He's slowed down a little. But he's still on this. CNN 8 hours ago he tweeted that CNN is in a total meltdown with their fake news because their ratings are tanking since the election and credibility will soon be gone. And it's like every news agency's ratings go down after the election. What are you talking about? That's just like looking at the norm and calling it extraordinary. And and he has this ability, or when he attacked the New York Times saying they're losing thousands of subscriptions, when in fact their subscriptions were going up. He just states things that are just.
I wonder. Well, they're libelous, and I'm curious to know, as this goes forward, as we watch stocks go up and down on his tweets. It's a good day. It's a good time to be a day trader, by the way. But as we watch these stocks go up and down on tweets, I'm wondering, where if he's going to come out and say something blatantly false, it's a blatant lie. Why and where or who is going to come after him, and where is this going to end?
Yeah, it's
Something
certainly ripe for lawsuits.
not sustainable. Yeah, it has to happen. I mean, there's only so many times I'm going to let you tank my stock for lying online.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen more than once, I can tell you that.
Well, that's we're gonna have to wrap it up there.
Bring them on.
Bring them on. Bring them. Well, I want to thank you, Ben, as always, for your insights. I'm gonna take you down, and we're gonna talk about. That is the end of the show for today, and want to thank you for joining the Dr. DigiPol show. We are here to bring you insights into the intersection of digital politics, both deep dives into experts, bringing in experts on various topics, as well as analysis and commentary on the day-to-day politics on digital and social media. I hope you find it interesting. I hope we see you again. And tell your friends to check out the archives. We've got lots of great shows on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Dr. DigiPol is in. And you can find links to all of the information about the show there. Thank you very much. And till then, we are going to do a bit of our head bopping on the way out, and hope everybody's good.